Hey guys, Fika here. I was going to narrate the whole thing so you could understand what's happening, but I don't feel like talking, so please pretend this is my voice. So I saw this heart print fabric online and 2 minutes later I had a week worth of project planned out. I just needed to turn myself into a strawberry. You see, I'm celebrating pride by being the fruit. Swoosh. So I made this gown for the dummy about 20 days into lockdown, which seemed like eternity back then. Since then it became super dusty and took up too much space, so I decided we'd be twinning. By the way, I went no poo water only about 7 weeks ago, so my hair looks pretty much like this too. No, I will not stop chasing clout by exploiting my cat's cuteness. This is a lie. I only ironed about a square foot of each because it's summer, it's hot and ironing sucks butt. For the bodice I used this questionably marketed vest pattern from the late 80s, that I already altered earlier to fit me and the lack of shoulder pads better. For the skirt I used the simple gathered rectangle type of pattern because it's the most economical way to get the most volume and swoosh. And also me and my dress form also have scoliosis, so leveling a circle or a line skirt would be a pain in the butt. I should really start cutting fabric instead of tearing if I'm this set on skipping ironing. This is how my patterns are organized. For the lining and underskirt I used a blanket my grandma gave me. That was a huge mistake because it's the super tightly woven kind you'd make pillows of, so the feathers wouldn't poke through. But that also means sticking pins and needles into it is also pretty hard. I lost footage of cutting and putting the darts in the bodice part. It's the same piecist for the inside and outside, similar to what I drew earlier. For the doll I tried to recreate the same pattern but without actually having to do math, so it turned out pretty different. Who could have guessed? For the doll's bodice, the lining could be one piece, but because of the print of the fabric, the outer layer had to be separate pieces. She needed pockets too. I ripped off the ending of a pretty worn fast fashion belt that came with a pair of jeans about 10 years ago. It seemed easier than crafting a buckle. I needed floppy little strawberry leaf thingies to mark where the pockets are because the skirt is so full. On the other one I have of the same pattern, I always spend a few good seconds to find them. This is actually a completely normal sized watermelon. I'm just super tall. Yes, this is how you professionally thread the bobbin. For the skirt I needed one big rectangle and another of the same cut in half at the front so I can actually get into the dress. I needed to have the seams on the sides so putting in my huge and well-beloved pockets would be easier. For the underskirt I needed just one big rectangle with the opening at the front because there's no pockets there. The ruffles at the bottom are long and skinny rectangles, double the width of the skirts and about 20 centimeters short. There's no way I could properly make the collar or clean up the seams of the pockets of the doll's dress, so I starched them with water-based glue, but I'm pretty sure she won't sweat into it, so I guess it will be fine. The hem-rolling foot is a whimsical god, but I think I paid enough sacrifices in front of her, so we're on speaking terms now. I made the ruffle pieces into a big loop before attaching it to the skirt. He absolutely loves sitting on the pieces I'm working on. I think he just wants to assert dominance, but I have the water spraying bottle. So I attached the skirt pieces at the sides, inserting the pockets, and on the front about 2/3 of the way up. This happens when you don't check how straight they cut you the fabric at the store. From the excess piece from the bottom of the skirt I had to make a pair of scrunchies. I'm not a fan of sauerkraut. We use our cabbages as soon as possible around here. to rip and reattach the side seams of her bodice, but that's on me for not bothering to take proper measurements. She also needed at least a tank top to make her dress a bit more modest. I made her skirt the same as mine, then attached the ruffle layer and gathered it evenly with a pretty energy-consuming method that I also hate with all of my heart. But I have anxiety and I can't trust myself to make it even any other way. Anyways, I take donations of antique gathering attachments. The under and overskirts are about the same, should be the exact same, so I gathered and attached them to each other in one step. Then I attached it to the bodice, but at this point the layers were really thick already, so it was pretty hard to make them stay in place. Luckily a belt can hide some ugly waist seams. I hand sew on the collar so I could have the least amount of visible stitches if I was already too lazy to rethread the needle with green, then tried to iron down the ruffles the little so the insides wouldn't show. At this point I had to iron the big ruffles too. Now I could start gathering the 12 total meters of ruffles for the bottom of the skirt, which gave me a nice opportunity to think about my design choices for a good few hours as someone who hates doing gathers so much but also loves wearing them. After that, putting together the bodice felt like resting. Because I had to attach the collar, I couldn't do the bodice the way you attach every seam except the bottom and the shoulders. So I did the turning the fabric back inside thingy around the sleeves, or more like the lack of them, which made him pretty wonky, but they're either at the back, under my arm, or hidden by the collar, so I'm fine with that. Then I top stitched around the edges so the lining wouldn't move around. I actually am a morning person. But he's a dawn cat and wouldn't wait for me to be very loud. Then I finally got to attach the skirt to the bodice. The layers were so thick I surely would have broke my 3-year-old machine with it. I decided the scrunchies needed leaves too. Then it was time to do the closure. So I made little hoops of the green fabric and used these cute little flower buttons I baked a few months ago that happened to look like strawberry flowers. At this point the dress was more or less done and felt super heavy, so I got curious. It turned out to be somewhat over 2.5 pounds. Then I finished the belt and the doll's dress. Making it button up at her size was not an option I would even consider. I just sewed it on her like previous dress. In the meantime I had a hat on the way, so I got onto making some fake flowers for decoration for it. I starched these two with the glue. What might won't make them too durable, but the hat itself isn't waterproof either, so they'd go down together either way. I starched them before cutting the exact shape so they wouldn't fray when applying the glue. Sewing the starched fabric was a challenge for sure, but luckily a few stitches were enough. For cleaning up the inside seams, I decided to save myself a few breakdowns and a day of work, so asked for some help from my mom's industrial serger. The hat was too tall for my liking, so I took out a few rows from the middle and reattached the top and the brim, and this way I also had some extra straw to make a hat for the doll too. I have to admit, sewing a 2-inch small straw hat by hand is pretty hard, especially if you have no idea what you're doing. The last step was putting matching ribbons on the hats. And Shirley walked so we could run.